Hi, today I'm going to do a sort of a rant covering a lot of ground about some experiences I've been having recently with a relationship that has been very illuminating of a lot of the things that as a relationship coach and soon to be therapist, I pay attention to and have done many other videos speaking to about the way that our culture is so prone to polarization. And in particular, the experience that I had was dating someone who is undoubtedly a narcissist, has many of the DSM-5 traits of narcissism. And typically what I see when people date a narcissist is they usually end with a lot of really bitter feelings, blaming, and sort of demonizing the narcissist. And in my experience, this particular round, I actually wanted to approach it differently. I know this person outside a romantic relationship and have a sort of affinity with him. And part of the affinity is what I would call a holographic connection or mirror. That is something that actually comes up for me a lot in the people that I end up having in my life. And what that often has to do with is men who are fathers who are not able to be in their children's life. And what's interesting is that when I was a teenager, I stopped having my father in my life, and I feel like that was a huge detriment to me. And then I ended up becoming a single mom and not having my son's father in his life or in my life supporting me, again, to our detriment. And so at the same time as I carry a really deep abandonment wound and pain of these fathers not being able to be present for me, I seem to, for years and years and years, now I'm 42 years old, my son is 22, continue to find myself attracting men who are fathers who are not in their children's life. And in particular, this is a man who I've felt really strong connection to, attraction to for many years. And so despite the warning signs, including many people I know giving warnings, I decided to go forward and had definitely, I will admit, a sense of the Florence Nightingale syndrome of feeling like I could help him, and in a way feel like it's like a karmic relationship where we have shared karma. He's not able to be in his children's life. My son's dad wasn't able to be in my son's life, and here we have this opportunity for holographic healing. And holographic healing, I talk about a lot, but I'll bring it up again with some other kind of threads that are really intriguing from a science and philosophy standpoint. So I'll speak a little bit to some African philosophy around the family soul. And so in the Zulu tradition, which is the way I know about it through family constellations, and Bert Hellinger, who was a Western psychologist from Europe who went and studied with the Zulus in West Africa, who believe in a family soul. And they believe that this family soul is inherently whole, and that when traumas happen, it creates a sort of break or fragmentation. And so there will be patterns from the family soul that will perpetuate in descendants, even if they've been adopted or not raised in said family. Those patterns come out almost on like a karmic family karma soul level. And what the philosophy is that that is not like a punishment, as we sometimes think of karma, but it's actually the attempt of the family soul for reconciliation, for integration, for wholeness. And this is very similar to depth psychology and Carl Jung, who talks about how the soul's destiny is wholeness. The soul is seeking wholeness. And part of that is bringing light to things that are in the shadow. Again, what we often look at as quote unquote negative in the shadow, same as what we were talking about with karma. So there's a relationship therapy practice rooted in Carl Jung's philosophy that's called imago therapy. And in imago therapy, the tendency for couples to have conflict and problems is not seen as something that is bad. It is seen as the natural purpose of relationship, is that we are going to actually attract people who reflect both our light and our shadow, what the Zulus might call from our family soul, as well as probably the unique characteristics of each of us as individuals, and what our family and our upbringing and our relationship with our parents is. So there you go again. So the fact that I dated this man who had these mirrors for me from my birth family of origin, from my soul healing path of karma, of actually I come to find out that my great-grandfather was one of these fathers who was not allowed to be in his children's life. And so this pattern is playing itself out. And it's not just playing itself out in my life. This is a pattern that in our contemporary society is playing out dramatically. There are so many children who are growing up without fathers. I'm currently in my mental health counseling internship, and more than half of the clients who come see me are not growing up, have not grown up with a healthy father role model. Many of them have had experiences of their father being abusive and thus not in their lives. And I see this as something that is likely contributing to the anxiety disorders and identity issues that they're bringing, because there is a really obviously natural reason why mothers and fathers make children, and the fact that the fathers are not being welcome, to me, is not something that we can just sit back and be complacent about. So I went into this relationship thinking, I want to help this man. I want this to be like a redeeming experience for me, for what I've gone through as a single mom, what I went through in losing my own father. And what I can say is that at this point, we are no longer in this relationship. It was about a month of an arc, and it was challenging, but there were also really, really good aspects to it. So I did want to speak a little bit before getting into the challenges of what it was that, what I think people are attracted to in narcissists. And what was really interesting about this particular person is that he actually was able to be vulnerable with me, possibly because of my gifts as a counselor, therapist, coach, possibly because we'd known each other for 4 years, so he felt open, who knows. And he's in therapy, he is doing work, so it's not like he's completely like blind and not connected. So he was able to be vulnerable, which I think a lot of narcissists struggle to be vulnerable. And so he was able to tell me a lot about kind of how this persona came to be, which was that he had a really tough childhood, basically became an orphan as a teenager, and in order to sort of survive, created a mask of everything is okay. He's got this, he's confident, and really like show no weakness. He was in football, and just like a lot of like masculine culture that was really emphasizing that like he should present himself as infallible. And I do think that's a common thing, and probably I think the core issue with narcissists, which he was starting to shift, like the ability to self-reflect and acknowledge mistakes, was something I was starting to see him work on, that I think is really the breakthrough of how someone could transcend that narcissistic pattern. But anyway, present as somebody who's got your shit together. He's attractive, he's confident, he's charismatic, he lays on the compliments. I have never been with anyone who's as affirming, who lifts me up and makes me feel so good about myself when he is speaking to me in the positive. Oh my goodness. And I too am somebody who's incredibly passionate and intense, which I don't know if that's just his narcissism or other dimensions of his personality. And so that was this feeling of like, for the first time I felt like I was with somebody who could actually like hang and meet me with the level of love and passion. At the same time, it felt a little bit like excessive for both of us, like too much too soon. What a lot of the research is starting to call love bombing was undoubtedly happening. There were conversations about our future out the gate, which maybe a lot of us are doing that. You know, that's something that we like to romanticize and fantasize. So there were a lot of great things. What was hard was the ruminations and the opposite of ways that he would think really negative thoughts about me and about our relationship, almost unquestionably rooted in his own fears from the past and insecurities and wounds. But because his defense mechanism is to not have fears and wounds holding him back, he could never admit it. So it would always get projected on to me as I'm doing something wrong. And then when I would experiment with different ways of receiving that, what I did find for anybody who is attempting to be in relationship with a narcissist is that my ability to stay completely neutral and not give energy to those ruminations, similar to how if you're working with a client as a mental health professional or a parent of somebody who struggles with ruminating thoughts or even like delusions, let's say someone has schizophrenia or something like that, you're not supposed to give energy to what they're saying, but you're not necessarily supposed to negate it either. There is something valid in that person's experience. And in a way, when this narcissist was ruminating and projecting these negative things onto me, what I think a lot of other women have called psychological abuse, which it could be seen as that, and I did experience it as that at times, when I was able to not take it personally and understand that this was actually coming from his fears and me not engaging and having discipline with that. First of all, it helped me to not get activated. Second of all, he actually responded in kind, and we started to create a new culture in our relationship where he was not doing as much of that. Now, that being said, I had moments where I was not in my strength, where I could not hold that neutrality, and where I absolutely took things he said personally. I'm a human, I have my wounds too, and I reacted. And I feel that in a lot of ways, those reactions were rooted in the dominant paradigm of blaming someone who's a narcissist, blaming the man, blaming someone for causing me pain, even though the Four Agreements talks about how we should not take anything personally, and ultimately it's our responsibility. So I can see how I was like influenced by the stories about this man being psychologically abusive to then use that terminology in my thinking, in my communication, and all that did was reinforce the pattern. And in retrospect, I wish that I could have had better skills and tools to be able to just stay soft and stay in a place of being able to have better boundaries, communicate in a more nonviolent communication way of, the needs that I had, which I did do at times, not to say I didn't do that at all. But the main point of this is that I think everyone deserves love. And when I went into this relationship with this man, knowing he had narcissistic traits, I felt like I maybe had what it took to be able to make it work. And whether or not our relationship was meant to be romantically, I still hope that the influence that I had on him could be contributing to his well-being and potentially support him to be more aware and available to be in healthier relationships with other women, and most importantly with his children. That's really what it was all about for me. And I don't really know how you could engage in this kind of healing unless you're in a relationship to do it, because the stuff is really not going to come out. Like the way he presents out in public is completely different than how these dynamics are coming up in a romantic relationship. So I am a huge fan of the path of relationship as the medicine, relationship as healing, and as vulnerable as it is to share about something that I've personally gone through. Here I am, this 40-something-year-old coach, therapist, like I should have it all together. I have self-judgment coming up about the fact that I, allowed myself to be in a relationship that wasn't, that had warning signs out the gate. But you know what? I wanted to reclaim that, and I wanted to speak to the humanness of it and the fact that it actually was coming from some very healthy, genuine places, going back to the imago therapy, this concept of the family soul, the holographic healing that's possible, that I think a lot of people demonize or shame or say shouldn't happen. And I actually think like we're doing that for a reason. And if we had more support, which is what my vision for my life is, to grow into being able to provide support so that families and relationships are not going through this inevitable process of facing the shadow alone. And, I think back to when my son's dad and I were having conflict. We were so young. We were in our 20s. and struggling. In particular, he was struggling with addiction. I was struggling with my communication and how to regulate my emotions, which I still default into when I'm not in a resource place. And no one supported us. I mean, I had friends who I was able to vent to, but for the most part, what I observed was people just enabling me to be in a blaming dynamic with him, enabling him to continue to drink or smoke weed. And, you know, if we actually had a village, if we actually had people who were educated and conscious and compassionate about relationship, I really think that a lot of these things that are causing so much pain and like heartache and separation, we have so many people who are in these ruptured relationships, or even worse, broken families. There's generations upon generations of broken families now, and it's hurting us. It's not beneficial. And yeah, we have to get out of our own selfish, you know, individualism to pay attention, to give energy to other people. And like, for the most part, that's just like, oh yeah, like pay someone to do it. But at the end of the day, people who know each other and who are going into relationship with each other are going to be so much more effective if they're skilled to help you, because they actually know you, opposed to having to pay a coach or a therapist. Sure, that's not to say either or, but I'm really here on this planet to take a stand for peer leadership and relational healing in community and even in relationships. And so I don't know if this resonates for other people. I feel like a lot of what I just went through with this man is very common these days. And I, like so many other people / women, have definitely been feeling this temptation to blame him and make him wrong. And at the same time, and I'm witnessing him do the same to me. He's blaming me and he's making me wrong. And there's this almost this like coming up with a list of all the things that each one of us did wrong. That even came up, like, let's make a list. And I'm thinking, let's make a list of what worked, what we learned, what we appreciated from each other. And as I'm doing the healing from the breakup, grieving, I am really working on not staying in the story of blaming him, but going back and being like, what could I have done differently? Taking radical personal responsibility and really having a lot of love and compassion for myself and him. And I hope that we all can do that, regardless of whether the other person is cooperating, interested, participating. And I'm really holding a vision and a prayer for healing for all of our hearts, all of our families, all of our relationships, and calling in even more aligned play partner, learning partner, evolutionary partner for myself, for all of you, to do this powerful healing work.